Well, Stephen Kinzer, we're going to come forward. Your theory, what the thesis you're putting forward in Reset is that there could be a strategic alliance, a new power triangle between the United States, Iran, and Turkey. Explain the histories of these countries that makes you believe this and where the U.S. could engage with them today.
I start out from the principle that our policy toward the Middle East is really stuck in a vanished era. Our policies may or may not have made sense during the Cold War, but the Cold War has been over for more than 20 years. The strategic environment in the Middle East has changed tremendously. New threats to American and Western interests have emerged there, and new opportunities have also emerged there. But our policy is still stuck in a former era. We're trying to deal with problems that don't even exist anymore. We're way back in time. We need to be looking forward into the 21st century and figuring out how do we want to conform our policies toward the Middle East in a way that will be beneficial to us and produce the result that in the long run is going to be good for the United States in the Middle East, which is stability. The policies we've followed up to now have manifestly failed to do that. During all this period that the U.S. has been a dominant force in the Middle East, we have wound up producing a region that is a pit of violence and hatred and terror and war. So we're in a situation like Einstein referred to, I think, when he defined insanity as doing the same thing over and over again, but expecting different results. That's what we're doing in the Middle East. So I start from this premise that we need to think big. We need to break out of this very narrow spectrum of acceptable opinions and try to think in a more creative, original way about what could the future of the Middle East look like. And the second basis for my ideas is that we've got to stop thinking about what to do next week and next month. We've got to start thinking about what to do in the decades ahead. This is something that the American foreign policy establishment is notoriously bad at doing. So I'm trying to make my contribution. Here's what I see. I think that in the future, the United States needs to look for partners in that region. I think we've shown that we don't fully understand the subtleties there, although we have this idea we get the Middle East. Other countries don't get the Middle East, including countries that are there. Therefore, our policies are the wise ones, and foolish countries in that region that have other ideas are just ignorant and don't know how really to resolve these problems. So, who should be our partners? I believe when a country looks for partners, we should be looking for countries that fit two criteria. Number one, they should be countries that have long-term strategic goals that are relatively congruent with ours. But that isn't enough. You also need one other thing, because alliances and partnerships that are based on just relationships between ruling elites, government-to-government alliances, often tend to be very weak because those regimes with which we partner are often very unpopular in their own country. And then since people don't like their regimes, they see the U.S. friendly with those regimes, then they don't like us either. So there needs to be a second basis for our relationship with our partners, and that is you need to find countries to partner with whose societies are similar to your own. If you look around the Muslim Middle East, there are only two countries that fit those two criteria: long-term strategic goals similar to ours and societies that share values like ours. And those are Turkey and Iran. Now, a partnership among those three countries right now would be difficult to achieve, although I think it might not be as difficult as some people imagine if we really open our minds and try to be creative here. On the other hand, over the long run, I think at the very least we shouldn't be doing anything that will make this partnership more difficult in the future. Turkey is producing a very interesting new approach to foreign affairs. They're essentially telling the United States, we share your values. We share your goals in this part of the world. We're your military ally. We support the same principles that you support. But we have some advice on tactics for you. You can't be so confrontational here. You've got to ratchet down your rhetoric and try to resolve some of the problems in this region through diplomacy and compromise and negotiation. America is not ready for that kind of advice yet. And that's what really lies behind the friction of these last few weeks between Turkey and the United States.
Let's talk about Turkey, the United States, and Israel. talk about the U.S. relationship. Actually, interestingly, you talk about the U.S. and their relationship with Israel and Saudi Arabia, and now you're talking about an alliance with Turkey and Iran. But talk about the attack on the Gaza flotilla by the Israeli commandos and what this has meant for Turkey and Israel.
There's been a lot of talk recently about the Islamization of Turkish society, which I think is way overblown. What you're really seeing is a more full expression of democracy now that Turks are free to be what they want. At the same time, there's been this parallel view, particularly in recent weeks, that Turkey is adopting a kind of a more Islamic or Middle East-focused foreign policy, and they've essentially become a frenemy. They've flipped sides. They're a potential defector from the coalition of the virtuous over to Iran and crazy Islamists. This also is way exaggerated. What we've seen in the last few weeks between Turkey and Israel is not the result of some great surge of Islamist belief or anti-Israel passion in Turkey. In fact, Turkey and Israel have had very good relations over decades. Turkey was one of the first countries to recognize Israel when it was created in the late 1940s. The relationship between the two has been economic, it's been political, and it's even been military. So they have a long history, and even before the establishment of the state of Turkey, relations between Ottoman Empire and Jews were fantastic. Jews were flooding into the Ottoman Empire from Poland and Russia and from Spain and Germany for centuries. So there's a long history there. So why did this conflict emerge? I think it really is a function of what happened in Gaza. It's hard for us in America to realize what it's like sitting in Turkey or somewhere else in the Middle East. You're watching every single day on your TV what's going on in Gaza. People are really focused on Gaza, and that project has been going on for well over a year now. Every time there's an episode in Gaza, it gets replayed over and over. You remember that Turkey was negotiating a secret deal between Israel and Syria at the time of the Gaza invasion. And Turkey was shocked that just as this secret new breakthrough toward peace seemed like it was imminent between Israel and Syria, the Turks woke up one morning and found out that the whole thing had been blown up because Israel has just invaded Gaza. So the Turks were furious. They really felt betrayed. Last year's blow-up at Davos between the Turkish Prime Minister, Tayyip Erdogan, and the President of Israel was not based on just general hostility. It was specifically about Gaza. And this flotilla is not a Turkish attack on Israel. What it is a statement by Turkey that we find the Gaza occupation intolerable. So I think we should separate that particular episode, what's been happening in Gaza over the last 18 months, from the larger Turkey-Israel problem. I think this relationship is not lost forever. I'd like to see both sides start to ratchet down their rhetoric now and try to pursue a more conciliatory policy. And I think that is possible because what the Turks are really looking for is not the end of Israel or huge changes in Israel. What they're looking for is changes in Gaza. If that can start to happen, I think this relationship can be repaired. Well,
what about Israel attacking this ship and killing 8 Turks, 1 Turkish American? What made Israel, in its relationship with Turkey, think that they could get away with this?
I think even friends of Israel in the United States are beginning to ask themselves, is Israel acting in ways that are really going to protect its long-term security, or is Israel acting in ways that actually endanger its long-term security? Israel is not going to be able to maintain its position in the Middle East indefinitely just by military means. I think the attack on the ship in the Mediterranean that was headed for Gaza was an expression of Israeli desire to set the rules for that part of the world. They don't want any challenge. However, I think this operation wound up being a success for the planners